Okay, so good evening, everyone. Welcome to my front room in Nether Edge. And yeah, we've got a storm just finishing outside, and I've got my two children going to sleep, hopefully in the room above me. So hopefully that will go well, and there won't be too many interruptions from the storm or the children. Yeah, so the theme of my talk that I was given to talk about was reflections about lockdown, maybe lessons that I've learnt through lockdown. But the theme kind of evolved and changed over the last couple of days, and you'll see as the talk goes on, it's kind of turned into something a little bit different. But I will start with a bit of the context, which some of you may know about me already. So yeah, I've got, as I just mentioned, I've got two very young children, aged 3 and 6. My wife's a doctor with a lot of responsibility. So for a lot of lockdown, I've been doing a lot more childcare. And so my experience has been very, very different to normal. I've been at home trying to entertain and look after, educate the children. And it's changed a little bit the last couple of weeks. They've gone back to school and to nursery a bit, so that's starting to change. But that's been predominantly my experience for the last 3 months or so. Yeah, very quickly, one of the things I learned was that a lot of the things I thought I needed weren't that important, weren't so important. So those who've known me for a while will know I'm usually very preoccupied with football, and straight away football stopped, and it just didn't seem important at all. And that's probably obvious to a lot of you already, but it became more apparent to me, oh yeah, it's not important, is it? So that's something maybe simple and obvious that became apparent. So, and lots of other things like that, things I thought I needed to rely on, things I thought I needed in my life suddenly weren't available, and they didn't seem to matter. And then there was also things that I maybe took for granted that I couldn't have access to anymore, like my friends and my family, my loved ones. And now as lockdown's eased a little bit and I can see them outdoors, I'm really appreciating being able to spend time with loved ones, with friends. It's just so good to see my friends on the centre team this week, to be able to meet with Amoga Vanks and my preceptor face to face, and other friends from the Sangha, to spend time with my parents outdoors. So yeah, one of the things in my intentions really, I think vow might be too strong. My intention would be trying not to take my friends and loved ones for granted so much, just to really appreciate when I can be in their presence. Well, this is really precious, and not to take that for granted, because who knows when, suddenly it can be taken away from you. And another thing which seems so much more valuable to me now is nature and beauty. Yeah, being able to hear birdsong, appreciating beautiful skies, just suddenly, without all the other input, there's much more space for that, and beauty seemed to come flooding in and alive. So it seems much more valuable to me now. So some really valuable lessons immediately learned from the lockdown. I also can remember just the first few times of going out the house. I was inside the house mostly for a few weeks, most of the time, and just going out for a walk in the evening and seeing adults, strangers, people I didn't know, and just being delighted to see a human being, and smiling at them, waving at them, and stepping out of their way. And it just seemed lovely to be among human beings, strangers, whereas, yeah, so often before I just not even notice and just completely take them for granted. So yeah, so hopefully some of that perspective will stay with me. And one of the things I've really appreciated and learned as well, that's become apparent, is how much the Buddha, the Dharma and the Sangha have prepared me and protected me for what could have been the worst of lockdown and the worst of a situation like this. They really have been refuges. I feel like I really have been protected by the Buddha, the Dharma and the Sangha. So yeah, the Buddha just reminds me of what my purpose is, what my life is for, what my life is about. The Dharma has reminded me, pointed out that, and I can't control the events around me, but I can always control my state of mind and my responses to the situation. So the Dharma has given me a way of examining my mind, working with my mind to cope with lockdown. And then maybe most importantly has been the Sangha, and by that I mean the Sangha in Sheffield, my friends. Well, anyway, the Sangha around the world as well. I've just been really inspired and impressed by people's practice. It's just become apparent as people have been tested in a way by the conditions how well people are doing, how well people are practicing individually throughout our Sangha. And that's really inspired me and impressed me. So the Buddha, the Dharma and the Sangha have really been refuges, really protected me during this time. But I mentioned about working with my mind, exploring my mind, and I want to talk about that a bit more next. So one of the things that became really clear, it's a bit like being on retreat when everything's taken away. You can notice what's going on in your mind much more, and that's been the case during the last period, the last few months. And it's been really clear, well, there's just two different strands. And anyway, this is the heart of Buddhism, but there's just two different strands, two different forces at play within my mind. And it seems like my mind gets pulled in two different competing directions. And what can be prevalent within our society is a strong pull towards individualism, towards looking after ourselves and our immediate family. And we often talk about this as a danger for us Buddhists in the West, that it can kind of distort our Buddhist practice. It can become all about me, my attainment, my insight, my mental states, my progress. So we really emphasize altruism in the West to try and counter this. I've really noticed this tendency during lockdown being accentuated. We're all in our own houses. I've been in my own house with my own family. My world has kind of shrunk down, narrowed down, and it's become at times about me and my immediate family. And we could see this in society in the early days of lockdown, where people were looking out for themselves sometimes, like just clearing the shelves in the supermarkets, taking the toilet rolls, taking whatever they could get hold of. So there can be a very human instinct just to look after ourselves and look after number one. And I could really see that sometimes in my own mind, in my own heart, just quite clearly in the last few weeks. But I could also observe another trend, another dynamic, another force on my heart, which was a desire to move outwards, to reach out to other people, to help other people, to help those around me, to act out of love rather than fear, and to try and help people in need around me. So during lockdown, as well as highlighting this kind of this pull towards individualism, it's also been really beautiful and lovely to see kind of new shoots of community sprouting up around us, around me and around Sheffield. So there's been a community WhatsApp group for our street. I gave a talk towards us early on in lockdown, and I mentioned about how we were self-isolating in our house, and the local mechanic from the local garage came and picked up my car to do the MOT and then dropped it back off again. And a lady from the local gift shop posted some Mother's Day cards through my door so I could give my wife and my children could give their mum a Mother's Day card. So just little acts of kindness, people going out of the way to help each other. And Vidania was telling me yesterday about how a young family over the road from him have pushed a note through the door saying, well, if we can get anything for you, let us know. If we can do anything on your allotment, let us know. So there just seems there's lots of people looking out for each other. And I've really appreciated that in myself as well. When I've been able to act on that, I've really found that fulfilling and pleasurable. Yeah, I got to meet some neighbours. I've moved into this house 3 years ago and I hadn't really spoken to the neighbours across the road, but I got a message on the WhatsApp group asking would somebody get a prescription for them. So I said, yeah, I'd be delighted to do that. And then I've got into a communication with them. I know what their names are now, and we're in a dialogue. And if they need some medicine or other stuff, then they'll let me know and I'll get it for them. I've found out again from our local community group about a local organisation that helps families in need around Sheffield, around our area, which I didn't know about. And through that, the men's community were able to donate a bike that they didn't need to a man who just got a new job and couldn't get to work easily. So the men's community were able to donate a bike to him. So there's been loads and loads and loads of acts like this of kindness and altruism, people going out of their way to help other people. And that has been beautiful, actually. That's been wonderful. I was looking today on the BBC News website. I often go there for news, and there's an interview with the Dalai Lama. The Dalai Lama has been interviewed about the current situation. One of the things he said that struck me is that many people, they don't even care about their own safety, but they're helping other people, and how wonderful that is. And that makes me think about the frontline people through COVID, the NHS workers who've made huge sacrifices to look after strangers, people that they don't know. they've been living apart from their families for a long time, even putting their lives at risk to protect and care strangers, people that they don't know. So there are these two trends within humanity, within each of us. There's this potentially inward-looking, fearful, self-protecting trend within all of us, within our hearts, within humanity. But there's also this outward-reaching, altruistic, caring, loving trend within all of us and within society. And these two trends can influence how we behave socially, how we behave collectively. They're not just within us, we can see them manifest collectively. And this is something that maybe reflections, things I've observed over recent weeks, and maybe concerns of mine about society. In times of uncertainty, when we are challenged, when we face fear, uncertainty, isolation, human beings have traditionally always sought refuge and safety from groups, belonging to a group, being part of a group. It gives us a sense of connection, being with people who look like me, who think like me, dress like me, shop in the same places as me, post the same memes as me or gifts as me. So we kind of seek out people like us, people like me, to have a sense of belonging. It's a way of seeking kind of refuge from the uncertainty of life and the dukkha of life. And it's a natural thing to do. And it's a positive thing to get a sense of belonging, a sense of connection. But Sangha has spoken about the dangers of groups and over-identifying with groups, being part of groups, because when you belong to a group, you're expected to conform to that group, to behave the same way as everybody else, to think the same way as everybody else. And if you don't conform to the group, if you don't go along with the group, well, the group can turn against you. And historically, that's been life or death for human beings. Like to go against the group, to not conform with the group, can be dangerous at times. So as Buddhists, as Dharma practitioners, we are committing to become somebody who can act independently, who can make our own choices, to choose what we want to do with our life, what is most valuable to us, how are we going to live, what are we going to live by, and not necessarily to follow the expectations of our friends or our family or other groups that we might belong to. So just one other thing about groups is it can be really easy to just unthinkingly adopt the ideas from the groups we belong to. And we don't even realize it's happening. It seems like, well, that's just how the world is. We've always seen the world like that. And that's how our friends or our family have always seen the world. So we don't realize that these are our ideas about the world that we've kind of imbibed. And the danger is that we become passive. We just stop thinking for ourselves. We take ideologies off the shelf, as it were, without really questioning those for ourselves, the views and the ideas, without exploring the assumptions that go along with those. Just thinking of like a small example of this might be, I might notice, I used to use Facebook. I don't use Facebook anymore, but I used to use it, and I'd just see like a headline and an image and think, oh, that looks really interesting. I agree with that. But rather than actually read the article, I'll just share it, just how I agree with that, without even taking the trouble to explore it more deeply. And that's very common with a lot of our ideas. We just we don't dig underneath them and explore the assumptions underlying them. So groups can be dangerous in different ways. We have expected to conform. They come with kind of ready-made ideas that might not be always healthy. So the reason I'm talking about this is that at the moment, as the world becomes increasingly less certain and suffering and dukkha seems to be ramping up for people, maybe a big concern for me, is that people start to identify more and more with particular groups that they belong to. And the fears that we have about the world, the insecurity that we have about the world, start to get projected onto other people, onto other groups that are different from our group. So society starts to polarize more and more into different groups, and it becomes them and us. Different groups. We project our fears onto other groups. And if we need a grim reminder of what can happen when people identify with groups and polarize against groups with other views, well, today is the 4th anniversary of the murder of Joe Cox, the MP Joe Cox. And that it's just a very grim reminder of what can go wrong, what can happen when society fractures in that way, when society polarizes along groups of different views. Yeah, so as I said, I was going to give quite a different talk until yesterday, actually. And yesterday, I was moved by an image I saw again on the BBC. So maybe if Ariadasta could share this image on the screen for us, it might take a moment to come up. So yesterday, I came across this story, this image that really struck me. It was a story about a man, the man there in the centre of the picture carrying the other guy. He's called Patrick Hutchinson. And him and his friends, Jermaine and Pierre, they were taking part in a protest, a Black Lives Matter protest. And there's a counter protest taking place from another group with different views to theirs. I think he said he thought it was either the English Defence League or the Football Fans Alliance, but another group, a counter protest group with other views to him, and they were very fiercely opposed to each other. But his friends saw that the other group became dispersed, and this one individual was left on his own and was set upon and being beaten up. And they acted out of instinct and just moved in to form a protective ring around this man. And Patrick scooped him up on his shoulder, as you can see in the image, and carried him to safety. And when I just saw this image and read this story, I just really, really, really moved by this. Such a powerful example of the opposite of that, that polarization, that kind of relating in terms of ideas and being fiercely opposed to each other. What Patrick said, I'll just try and find what Patrick's words were. He said, "Well, I wasn't thinking of myself. I was just thinking of a human being on the floor. I was just thinking of a human being on the floor." And he said it wasn't going to end well if we hadn't intervened. And I had no thoughts in my mind apart from getting to safety. And we did what we had to do. We stopped somebody from being killed. And Pierre, Patrick's friend, said, "Well, I've saved 2 lives. I've saved the man that's about to get beaten up, and I've saved the young guys who are going to get a life sentence for those acts." So it's a really, really powerful and moving image, an image of courage and love, selflessness. And in a way, what I want to talk about for the rest of the talk is this. This image captures it better than I can put into words. But I'll try and speak about why it's so important, why it moves me, and what it means for us as a Sangha as well, and as Buddhists. We need to take care that. So thanks, Ariadasa. Maybe we might come back to the image again later. So we need to take care that we're not polarizing in terms of ideologies and views, and that we can be confident and secure in our ideas, but we hold them lightly. And then that will enable us just to relate to the human beingness in other people, to other people as human beings. And we can connect, we can find we have something much more deeply in common with other people than our different opinions and our different views. And I mentioned Jo Cox earlier, who was murdered 4 years ago. And in her maiden speech in Parliament, I found out today, one of the things she said to Parliament was she talked about her own constituency, which is very diverse in Yorkshire, full of Yorkshire people born and bred, and also people of, she said, it's been really enriched by immigration from, particularly from Pakistan, she talked about. But she said, while we celebrate the diversity in her constituency, she said the thing that surprises her time and time again as she travels around, or she used to travel around the constituency, was that we are far more united and we've got far more in common with each other than that which divides us. We've got far more in common than that which divides us. And this reminded me of an extract from a talk that Sangharakshita gave in the 70s in India. He was on a tour in India, and he spoke about why he's a Buddhist. He was speaking about the nature of religion and what it means, what religion is and what Buddhism is, but he just spoke very, very candidly about why he's a Buddhist. And this is what he said in India in the 70s. He said, Buddhism addresses itself to the individual human being, regardless of race, nationality, caste, sex or age. Buddhism is therefore the religion of man, but you could say in kind of more modern terms, a religion of humanity. And Sangharakshita said, this is one of the reasons why I'm a Buddhist. I believe that humanity is basically one. I believe that it's possible for any human being to communicate with any other human being, to feel for any other human being, to be friends with any other human being. This is what I truly and deeply believe. This belief is part of my own experience. It's part of my own life. It's part of me. I cannot live without this belief, and I would rather die than give it up. So very, very powerful words, and in a way that that's better than I could express in the rest of the talk. If you just take that image and that quote, they sum it up really. But we've got a practice which helps us to see through those differences and cultivate a sense of common humanity, and it's the metta bhavana practice, the practice of metta bhavana, that meditation practice, and the practice of developing loving kindness in our lives. So in the metta bhavana, the practice acknowledges that the truth, the reality of our experience, that we do experience people belonging to different categories, friends, enemies, strangers, and this is perhaps based on arbitrary differences, maybe superficial likes and dislikes. Perhaps it's based on the different groups that we identify with and belong to. We see some people as friends, other people as strangers or enemies. And this seems to happen instinctively. It's part of being a human being, but we can learn to look past that, to look past these superficial, surface level categories, and we can cultivate a sense of common humanity. And this is what we're doing in the metta bhavana practice. And Dr. Ambedkar, who's really important for our Indian order, and sets a real example for our whole order. He was a very famous politician and Buddhist from the 1950s, a friend of Sangharakshita's. He had a term that he used, a Marathi term called manuski. And manuski is a word that means humanness, human beingness, a respect for the common humanity. So this is what we're trying to cultivate through metta bhavana, manuski, this sense of common humanity. So in the metta bhavana, we can go much deeper than these superficial likes and dislikes, and we can learn to empathize and cultivate this shared humanity with other people. So we know what it's like to suffer, to have unskillful states, to be at the mercy of our conditions, to be at the mercy of our urges, our desires. We know what it's like to experience loss, to suffer tragedy. But we can use that experience to understand that this other human being also experiences those exact same difficulties as I do. They're exactly the same as me in that way. Their experience is exactly the same. So right now, during this pandemic, it's a really, really, and I know some people are tired of us saying it's a great opportunity, but this is the perfect opportunity to cultivate metta in this way and compassion in this way. Because most of the human race, billions and billions of people, are facing the same conditions that we're facing right now. Billions of people are isolated from the people that they love. They're fearful about their safety, their health, and the health of their loved ones. They're fearful about their income. Oh no. I think what I was talking about was a metta bhavana practice, and that right now we've got this great opportunity to connect with humanity, really, to connect with the shared experience we're having with so many billions of people around the world. And we can connect on that deep level, manuski, of humanity, shared humanity. And we have much more in common than that which divides us. On the surface level, we belong to all these different groups and we have these likes and dislikes, but we're united at a much deeper level. We have much more in common than that which divides us. So what I wanted to end the talk by talking about the value of our Sangha to the world, really, what we can offer to the world in terms of community and what we can model to the world in terms of harmony as well. So that's the last part of the talk. So I think now more than ever, people need a sense of belonging to a community, and it makes what we offer as a Sangha and as a spiritual community more important now than maybe ever before. And there's another extract from Dalai Lama's interview on the BBC where he said, in the past, there was too much emphasis on my continent, my nation, my religion. And he says, now that thinking's out of date. Now we really need a sense of oneness of 7 billion human beings. And I think that's very beautiful and very moving, and reminds me of Sangharakshita's quote about the humanity is basically one. And But I think we can go even further than that as a Sangha. We can model for the world a community of people in really deep harmony with each other, you know, uniting on the basis of deep commonality, deep harmony, but at the same time celebrating the diversity, celebrating our own particularity, our own uniqueness. So the Sangha is made up of people from all different walks of life, and ideally more and more different walks of life and backgrounds, with all kinds of perspectives and opinions. And hopefully we can model to the world out there a way of being in harmony with each other, being able to maybe sometimes strongly disagree with each other, but acting out of love and being deeply connected on the basis of something much deeper than our different opinions. And I just wanted to share one more image, which was the image of the thousand-armed Avalokiteshvara. Vayadasa just shares that image for us. And this was an image that Sangha had for our order, for our community. And it captures, again, it might seem a strange image for those that haven't seen it before, but this idea of particularity and unity, individuality and harmony. So it's one being. Avalokiteshvara is one being, but he's got 11 heads and he's got 1,000 arms, 1,000 hands. And Sangha just says, well, this communicates, expresses how our order can be, how our community can be. Every hand is an individual Sangha member, an individual order member, maybe, with our own particular temperament, our own views, our own personality, completely different, completely unique. So we're not, you know, we are all one. Humanity is all one, but we're not all clones. We're not all the same. We've got distinct personalities, temperaments, views, qualities, opinions, but we are part of the same body, you know, in deep harmony. You know, Avalokiteshvara is you know, is one being with all these different hands. So we can model to the world being and celebrating, you know, diversity of people, of backgrounds, of cultures, of opinion, and being in deep harmony with each other, and operating out of love, and just, you know, hopefully making that available to as many people as possible and exemplifying that to the world. So that's the end of the talk. We can now go into groups. Thank you.
Okay.